Okay. All right. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to the Science Club for helping me in organizing this event. I am Saransh. I'm a fifth year BSMS student. Well, ex-student now. I just got my degree 2 days back, and I will be your moderator for this panel session. Because this is an internal event, I thought we need not bother with very long formal introductions. So on the panel, we have Professor Sunil Mukhi from physics. We have Professor Nagaraj from biology and Professor Nagarjuna from science education. So we have three different disciplines, but what is common to them, like apart from their passion for science and research, is their passion for education. And it would be interesting for us to get their perspective on the general theme that we have for today, which is the impact of AI in science education and research here at IISER Pune. And to quickly tell you about what led to the creation of this panel is just this general anxiety amongst us students about AI. So we have very large scale existential concerns about AI taking over the world and stuff, but we also have small scale concerns about, for example, us not getting jobs or us becoming too reliant on AI, and sometimes also wondering whether we are using enough AI or not, and maybe the other people are using enough AI and we need to catch up on our AI usage and stuff. So in light of all of this, we thought that it would be very helpful for faculty and students to come together and try to figure out how we should be navigating this new world of AI together. So I will once again send the Google form link in the chat box. So you can type in your questions here. You can type it in the chat box. You can unmute yourself, whatever you want to do. If you want to stay anonymous, you can use the Google form. But before I start with the questions, we thought that it would be good if we can ask the panelists to make some brief comments about the general theme that we have for today. So what is the impact of AI in science and education? So I guess we can just start with that. Can we start with Professor Mukhi?
Hello, everyone. Probably I'm the worst person to start with because I know the least about this subject. Is not false modesty. I really don't know much about AI comprehensively, but motivated partly by Saransh, who insisted that I should be here, I did a little study yesterday and today and tried to think. And I just want to very quickly share with you three um, views that I have tentatively formed. The first one is about internet. So I come from a generation where internet showed up when I was close to 40 or in my mid 30s. And till then, there was no such thing. And in fact, sorry, I was in my mid 40s. And I've been able to see how it changed everything. My observation is that before internet, only the privileged could really learn well. So you had to have access to a good library or afford textbooks. And going beyond the prescribed course of your college study was almost impossible because even your college library would only have those textbooks which you were supposed to learn. You could not just get wide-ranging information on things. There was just no way. And post internet, what has changed is there's plenty of information. There's just an abundance of information, but absorption and retention on average by humans has gone down. Of course, it has to go down because there's so much information. We can only absorb some fraction. But partly it feels that we have become more casual and lazy about absorbing things. So there are things happening, there are things out there, they're not going into our brain, we are not using them. And I think AI will accelerate this process. There are things happening in the world, and most people, I fear, will retain less and less, while a few people will progress more and more. This is not because those few people have privilege, but because they just somehow, I don't know, they just have the enthusiasm and drive. So somehow people with drive stand to benefit disproportionately, but we can't make it a an issue like saying, well, it's unfair on people from poor families, because frankly economics will not be the main determiner of how much we benefit or how much we involve ourselves with AI. I think it is already accessible at some level, like chat GPT is accessible to anyone with an internet connection, which is a lot of people. Okay, so this is one comment. Second comment is, I don't think this means we should avoid relying on AI. We can't, first of all, even if I take the personal decision, I'll never touch it. Well, the world will go on without me, and that's really all that will happen. And I think it's truly superb what it can do. So I tried to find out what AI does. And so I simply took the title of today's program, which I think is let me see, what the impact of AI in science research and education. And I pasted it into Chat GPT and I said, tell me the answer. And it gave me a beautifully formatted answer, one 5-point answer, impact on research, which I can share with you later, 5-point answer, impact on education. Everything it said is super smart. It's much better than I could provide any list for discussion. It also provided some challenges and considerations. It also offered to reformat the answer for a college student. So it's done that also. It has also got some warnings for college students, how they can benefit, not benefit, what are the risks, and so on. And it closed with a final thought. I find this awfully disturbing, to be dealing with a non-person who has final thoughts. First of all, it's friendly, it gives quick answers. The answers on many things are really good. And then it ends by saying, knowing how to engage thoughtfully with AI is part of being an empowered 21st century scholar. And it's right. So it's terrifying that there is such a non-person who is doing all these things, because in fact I keep feeling scared of becoming friends with this person, because the person is really much nicer than most of my friends, answers my questions and doesn't expect any gratitude from me. Why wouldn't I get attached to it? Third comment, and then I'll stop. Already I've taken a few minutes. New technologies do make it possible for us to get some things done by the technology. Internet did it, calculators did it in my school, college days, computers did it, internet did it, AI will do it. But finally, the question is, what is it? What is it means the goal that we are interested in. And I've always complained that in academia, and especially in science, most people don't talk about goals. If you ask somebody what is their goal, they'll say, well, in my lab, I wish to, I don't know, synthesize this or examine that or test this. But that's a small goal. If you keep yourself on small goals, AI might just solve all your goals and write all your papers and you're done. Then there's no need for you. But there are bigger goals. There could be overarching goals to understand, I don't know, the structure of, I can't say because I don't know enough biology, but the entire structure of genetics or of biological systems or of intelligent systems or consciousness, whatever. There are these big goals which till now we were limited to address. Maybe now we get a chance to make AI do the dirty work, and so it's like it does 90% of our work and we still have 10% where our thoughts and our imagination are needed. And there isn't much evidence that AI has imagination. So imagination and goals becomes privileged in this new era, and it forces us to focus on goals. So these are my 3 comments. To summarize, first, um, a revolution might create more disparity, even though it's open to everybody. Second, we still have to rely on AI because it's there and it's fantastic. And I think anyone who keeps running it down is just being silly and has never had a proper conversation with ChatGPT. It's just amazing. It is amazing. And the third is that we must remember our goals. I think focus on goals. And if we focus on goals, anyone who knows how to enunciate a goal probably will not be out of business even in this new era, but will actually do better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I see that we are really hitting the ground running today. Okay, can we go to Professor Nagaraj now?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I
yes,
have a bad on. Can you hear me? Yeah.
yes, we
Okay.
can.
So Sunil has set the stage well. I don't have a lot to say. I think it'll be. I feel that the discussion will probably bring out the really important things that I want to talk about. Right. So the only thing I think which Sunil alluded to is also I think the question that most people are walking around with is do are like this panel that is meeting to discuss this, right? If Sunil could get all the answers from ChatGPT, is this panel relevant at all? Are we going to say anything new that a set of questions and back and forth with ChatGPT cannot already tell you, right? I think that is the question that most of us are thinking about. I think one of the important aspects I have kind of grappled with is, critical thinking per se. Um, does the advent of AI really challenge, how critical thinking is done, right? Does it supplement how we critically think? Because we are in the business of, critical thinking, I would like to believe, right? And so that is a question that I think we are trying to understand. I think anybody who says they know the answers in these circumstances, I think is just lying. I think nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 10 years. I think, as Sunil pointed out, we've lived through this period of at least, GN, him and me have seen internet be on dial-up connections, and, it takes a while for you to get a page to load, and it truly changed how we do things. But the rate at which things changed was significantly slower, right? And that gave us time to anticipate what's coming next, maybe even prepare in some ways, slowly evolve our thought process as well. I think the challenge is going to be that change with AI is going to be at neck break speed, right? It's going to happen very, very quickly. And I think that's going to be part of the challenge for us as to how do we adapt, learn, improvise, grow with AI when things are moving at that pace, right? And that I think is something that probably this discussion will also bring up. I want to close with a quote which I was listening to something, an interview with Demis Hassabis. Demis is heads DeepMind at Google. He won a Nobel for AlphaFold along with John Jumper. He was asked in this podcast with The Guardian, if I remember correctly, what is the age to be in this ongoing AI revolution? Okay, and I thought it was really a remarkable question. I had not thought about it like that, and I think he paused and thought a bit about it as well. He said, "I have not thought about it this way," and his answer was very compelling, very telling. I think he said, "Any age you can live to see this happen is a good age." Okay, so he said, we are all living in remarkably exciting times, and despite all the challenges that this might pose, it's also a remarkable period to see this happening in front of your eyes, right? And we figure with time how to use it, how to implement this in different things we do, and some of those answers are not going to be clear to begin with, and will probably take time to discover what its true impact is going to be for all of us, And so I'll stop with that and maybe pass it on to GN for opening comments.
Yeah, just one second. Thank you for that, sir. Just one thing. I think your network is a bit patchy. We could hear everything, but you were breaking off in bits and pieces in the middle.
Okay. Let me see if I can go to another place.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to GN now? You're muted.
Yeah, I think now I'm on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so well, I think we got the ball rolling, and I mean, as a person who generally reflects around things that are happening all around, particularly in this particular space. There is, when internet came, it wasn't as disruptive, but then when technologies like search engines, etc., have come into the thing with Google Rank and things like that, a lot of things have changed. And in academic life, we have used, for example, things like Scholar to facilitate our research work and things like that. But now it's a different ball game altogether. I mean, it's a lot of meat for even philosophers to think about what exactly is knowledge and how do we understand what it is. And let's be very clear that we have very powerful learning model. Whether it is right or not, whether that's exactly the way how we learn or not, is a different question.
Oh.
Computer science. So
you need to repeat the last
Yeah, you disappeared for a few seconds, maybe 5-10 seconds.
all right. So I think, yeah. So, I mean, essentially what I said is that just AI tool.
One second.
You're freezing somehow. You freeze and then your voice goes away. Last 10 seconds, again, nothing. We couldn't hear it.
So I don't know. Then maybe what I could do is I can disable my video. Maybe that might help, so that at least the audio comes up nicely. I'll try this. All right. So essentially, so that's one of the important changes that I see in terms of what exactly is this change that is happening now. If you want really a kind of a good classification or even understanding of what was AI before and what is now. So currently it's a world of tokens. Earlier it was classes and types and tokens. So that's a major difference. In fact, there is no distinction between schema and individuals in the current AI model. And it's completely stochastic and not classical. And so that's sort of a major game changer in terms of even how we model our thinking. Even in that sense, for example, now science is understood, mathematics is understood within the token space, which is not a small achievement because it's an intellectually a very new game altogether. And in fact, the various classifications and categorizations that are happening are stochastic classifications and not rigid type schematic as it used to happen in the old AI. And that's a major change. From intellectually, for me, it's a very compelling and impactful change that's going to happen in epistemology and philosophical thinking as well. And so that's one interesting output for me as a philosopher. But as an educationist, one of the major disruptive change is that in the past, most of the things were passive in the sense that, even when we are watching videos, that was great. A lot of people were using video for education. People have used interactive educational tools and games as well. But then currently we are in chatting domain with the machine, which is a huge difference because we are now engaging with an agent, and that agent is not engaging with one person, but with multiple people at the same time. And it does enormous amount of heavy lifting of major tasks that we try to do, whether it is in terms of reviewing literature, whether it is in terms of getting summaries of various products. I don't have to tell this because, I mean, if you just type anything of this kind, you would get much better answers than what I can give. But the important, I think, UI UX change, as it is user interaction change, is that we are able to talk to this new machine or new agent in any language that we speak. It doesn't have to be English. And in fact, suddenly there is a huge improvement in terms of translation, both written as well as verbal translations of what people speak. I don't want to talk about graphical and other advantages that we have, but then just this particular aspect that suddenly the machine is become completely multilingual is a huge shift in access to information and knowledge. And so suddenly, therefore, we have now moved from passive use of technology to a very active use of technology, and therefore the impact is going to be absolutely phenomenal. And I spend like 3 to 4 hours a day reviewing the various aspects of this technology because of my curiosity right now to understand exactly how this is happening. And one major challenge for institutes like us, because you see, we are not only a university, we are also a college, but we are also a research institute. Wearing 3 different hats in one single place is a very different kind of constitution. Like when I was in TIFR, it's largely a research institute. But here we are doing 3 things at the same time. And therefore, there's a lot of administrative policy changes that we need to bring in to accommodate this transformation. And as it always happens, this technology is going to, challenge large administrative systems. And so how are we going to bring regulation, etc., of this technology is going to be a huge change. We have to change, we have to teach differently, we are going to learn differently, and we have to even think of alternate ideas of assessment, for example, because our existing assessments are going to break completely. So that's, I think, an important challenge for all of us in our institute like IISER, where we really have to think in terms of the reforms that are required in terms of teaching and the learning practices, and also in terms of assessment, of course, graduation and things like that. So maybe we can come back to some of these questions later, but this is where I stop right now.
Okay. Thank you, Gian. I think your internet is well again, so you could probably try turning on your video. So I will once again put the link to the Google form in the chat box. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, you can unmute, you can use the chat box. If you want to be anonymous, you can use the Google form. And we do not want this to be very formal. This is an open discussion. So do whatever you want. However, as a moderator, I will have to very gently guide the discussion so that in order to just ensure that we avoid very long tangents and we are making progress so that we cover a lot of the topics that people want to talk about. But just right now, if people want to unmute, if they have any questions, then they can put that to the panel and we can just start our Q&A/open discussion amongst us.
So I had a point to make on Gian's comment, right? I think I was thinking about this as he closed about how this works in administrative structures like ours, right? Which is interesting. So one of the things that isn't very clear to me is assessment. How you teach, how you learn are very obvious things that I think we will have to change and adapt, and we'll have to grow, incorporating this, finding new ways to use this to challenge you to think, things that were, for example, remembering stuff, right? How much value I mean, this was a big thing when at least I was in school and other stuff. A lot of emphasis was spent on remembering things, right? I mean, you had to memorize things. Now you probably will have to take this one step forward rather than just having to remember. How do you? Everything you want to know is accessible. There is somebody actually doing the thinking. How do I think better using that tool, I think is the question. Administrative challenges, I think, is an interesting point. I hadn't thought about, what administrative challenges this will bring, if at all. And yeah, I think that could be something that also pushes us to revise how we structure organizations, like IISER or other institutions. I think yeah, it's a good point. I didn't think of it before he said it. So somebody has a question posted, I guess, right?
Yeah, you can respond to it if you want to.
Right. So the question is, will it be sufficient to only use AI in brainstorming for new ideas in research, since AI always connects already related things based on its training? Will it be ever able to find something radically new? So see, for projects in the lab, for example, I've been trying to do this in terms of finding gaps in information, particularly. And in some cases, these gaps in information, we have, let's assume, recently discovered a gap and found something that can fill it. Now, the question is to go back to where we were maybe a year ago or 2 years ago and ask it that question and see if it pulls up this gap that our thinking has filled, and ask whether it could have done as we are thinking, as Rishikesh is asking, whether it could have thought of this, something that you have come up with over the last year or two. And so far it has not been very successful. At least my understanding is that it has pointed us in directions, but maybe there is information that is not out there, right? Unless it is published. So if people are talking about new ideas, not so one of the things in science is that I think not everything also gets published unless and until it's ready for publication, sort of, right? So you go to meetings, you hear from people about new things that are happening. In some cases you learn about things that they have done but never published, right? These pieces of information are missing in this database that it is looking at. So if you give it, my experience has been, if you give it a pointed question, the really interesting thing that comes out is how it is thinking through that question. Right. So, for example, I don't know whether ChatGPT does this, but DeepSeek has a deep think mode. And in deep think mode, it actually gives you a breakup of the thought process. Now, what was really interesting to me to look at the thought process is this is what I would want graduate students or any student to be able to do, to go stepwise, to be clear about how things are connecting, and then formulate a thought process. So for me, what was really exciting to see is you have access to how it thinks. And that could be very beneficial at this point of time, I feel. That if you, 8 out of 10 times, even 9 out of 10 times, I kind of was happy with how the thought process was structured. And that I felt I wanted to point out to students and say, look at the thought process, because tomorrow there is a question that you are thinking about. Maybe the critical thing is to implement this in some way when you think about a question or an association, in your work. This could be particularly useful to do, I feel. Right? So I'm not sure that it is filling all the gaps. The hope, I think, eventually is that it will start identifying gaps in information that exist. And what will be really exciting is if you have the understanding to distinguish between what is a gap in information worth pursuing versus something that is not. And you make an informed choice on what is it that you want to pick and work on. That I think is likely to happen in months, if not, a year, is my sense. Because every step of this process, it is getting better. I think the thing that bothers me or worries me is that, as I think Sunil probably mentioned it, that it seems to understand what you want to hear, and there is a certain sense, some sense of pandering. I because of this discussion yesterday, I sat down with my son and we did a kind of a search, for the PBKS MI match that is coming up today. Who's going to win? And we threw back questions at it and asked it to evaluate this, evaluate other aspects. Challenged it, saying, I don't think you're right about this. And at one point, a question that my son posed, it said, "This is a fantastic question," and he was supremely thrilled. I said, and I was like, Vivan, you have to realize that it seems to know, that you would like being told certain things. And with the newer versions, I don't use the paid 4.1 version, but I know friends who do, and they think that the newer versions do a lot more of this than the earlier versions did, right? So I think that is again something that we have to be considerate about. That I think we're all creatures of ego, and if it starts pandering to your thought process and saying, "Oh, fantastic idea," nobody would have found this out except you, and you fall for it, it could lead you in directions that maybe you don't want to go also. So that's another consideration.
Yeah, this is interesting. Like even in the context of education, as Jane was saying, that learning how to ask a specific question is something that we can train. But if
Yeah,
the model is telling me that any question that I ask is a good
yeah,
question,
yeah.
then how do I teach myself actually what is a good question, what is a bad question?
Yeah. So critique, I think, is going to be very important. I also feel a generation growing up hearing this may have a hard time understanding and processing critique. It's already happening, if you ask me, that there is a lot less, value for critique, to the point that I sometimes don't say what I'm thinking, right? I'm like, if I know the person and I know they will, take this in the right spirit, then it's worth saying, So that I do worry about in this context. That's,
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, yeah,
It
sure,
was
sure.
very illuminating what GN and Nagaraj said, and it made me think of the following. Also, GN has put in the chat, learning how to ask a specific question is one training we can consider imparting. To that, we can add also learning how to interpret an answer. And more generally, I think Nagaraj put it well, critique or critical thinking is essential. Now, I noticed that many universities abroad already have a one semester course or a part of a course, or even schools have it, on how to detect and avoid fake news. A course on that. Now, we don't have it as far as I know. We aren't even near, as far as I know, discussing to have it. And this is already, fake news is a product of social media, which is a product of internet. It's not, it is related to AI, but it's not invented by AI. It already was there for quite some time. It's growing. You might argue that in a school, the first thing you need to teach a kid as soon as they are, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old, no more than that, is this, how to detect and avoid fake news. Okay. Everything else, all the, for want of better word, garbage which we try to stuff into their brains, they will forget, just as I forgot most things that I was taught in school. But skills, now just to digress, I also feel that India has particularly suffered because we don't teach essential health and hygiene at a very low, young level in schools. And many grown-up parents who have not gone through formal education, and some who have, don't know basic things like the germ theory of infection or what to do with which kind of infection which their kids are having. Health and hygiene is something India should have prioritized much, much more on a massive level. Similarly, now, fake news is a form of health and hygiene, I think. It's a form of disease, and we should treat it as such. Okay. GN has also put in a question, how to detect if the agent is hallucinating. Very true. That's a very good point. So I think hallucination, if I understand right, is like a false vacuum into which the agent falls. Like its thinking reinforces itself until it reaches a completely nonsense conclusion. And yeah, all part of critique and critical thinking. And one
And
last
interestingly,
yes.
it's not that the agent is hallucinating; it is making us also to hallucinate.
Yes, of course, we will join its hallucination. And here I want to bring up one more point which occurred to me just in this discussion. I have come here to IISER from TIFR Mumbai. And TIFR Mumbai, many of you have been there. I think Nagarjuna mentioned also that he was there. TIFR has a very famous thing called the West Canteen, which looks like a huge luxury sea-facing, beautiful view. You can sit at a nice table in air conditioning and have your chai. But I've just been going there for the last 4 months every week. It's a fantastic place where you just keep bumping into other people. And if you do that, you keep talking to other people. And if you do that, you learn what's going on in the world, and it will help you to deal with many things and create. I see groups passionately arguing about physics or computer science or biology or maths at the canteen table. This kind of creativity is stimulated by in-person human close interaction. TIFR is great because it's in a corner of Mumbai, which is beautiful, but outside there's nothing except Navy. You're boxed in, it's very crowded, the canteen is very crowded, but it ends up that we meet, and that's what makes TIFR TIFR. And now look, IISER doesn't have that. Every time I go to IISER, another faculty member like Nagaraj or somebody will say, "Oh, I haven't seen you in months." And I'm like, but every single week I'm coming to my office. I'm not blaming Nagaraj. I'm saying I also haven't seen him, right? It's reflexive. We don't have that. And I have tried for the last 10 years to convince leadership that we need a place where we are stimulated and encouraged. The more beautiful, the better. It doesn't have to be luxurious, just nice place to meet. And I think this will create a personality for every institute, which will propagate, whether there is AI, whether there is internet, whether there is social media. Each institute will have its culture of how to think. And that will be more important, not less, in the AI future. That's my guess.
Okay.
I completely accept that. That's one of the missing things that I have here. In fact, though I work largely at Homi Baba Center, but still, most of the time we are in the canteen or in the foyer. That's the quadrangle where we spend most of our time. That is where our internal hallucinations are broken and perturbed. The moment you get out of your cabin, you're challenged by other people. And in fact, that's one major challenge of the design space of the IISER. We have to find out, and the best place to do that is the place where you go to drink and eat. So that's a very interesting cultural design that is missing right now. We'll of course we'll explore how this can be fixed if administrators are interested in listening.
I tried really hard when I was dean faculty, and when they had to listen to me, they all listened to me, and then it was just completely shelved, and I was very disappointed. We even found a place, we even found how it should be done. It was bothering me during COVID, because in COVID times, just post COVID, because we weren't meeting anybody, and outdoors is a good place if it's covered and it's in some sheltered area, when it's also safe to meet people even during COVID. But anyway, so yeah. So I think one emphasis, if this discussion can come with a conclusion that physical meeting is one of the most unreplaceable things that AI cannot influence, and that will help us to deal with the challenges of AI, I'd be very happy.
Actually, so if you try to do this, I am very sure you will get a lot of student support as well, because we feel a lack of this even amongst us. But anyways, yeah, moving on. Vinayak, do you want me to read out your question, or if it is fine, you can read it yourself if you want, if you can unmute? Okay, maybe he's not here. Okay, so Vinayak is saying AI is going to favor people with drive or agency. If that is the case, how should colleges or individuals try to inculcate this drive in the students themselves? Is it even possible to teach something like this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, one of the reasons we teach history, historical figures is to be amazed by the level of their drive. It might be Einstein, he already revolutionized all of physics in 1905 and then 10 years later re-revolutionized it. That's an amazing level of drive. But I think another thing which I always like to emphasize and which I think at IISER we can do, there's a lot of emphasis on ancient Indian science or science from this subcontinent or learning from this subcontinent, names like Aryabhat, Brahmagupta, Bhaskaracharya, and so on. But actually, from what I found, nobody actually knows anything about them. When I say nobody, I really mean nobody outside maybe an HSS or philosophy department. Literally, I don't think you'll find one politician in India who knows what any of these people did. You won't even find one scientist in the physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics world who knows much about what they did. And all of them had enormous drive because actually they were living in an era when their ideas were quite heretical, like Galileo. But the point is that Galileo, it's not somebody students can directly relate to, but maybe people from Ujjain or whoever, from our own subcontinent, living in our climate, immersed in our religious practices and whatever, and astrology, nevertheless found a way to come up with something really new, really long lasting, really solid, and very, very difficult. Aryabhat has all these formulae for various kinds of solutions to mathematics equations. What kind of drive is that? That's what we should be impressed by. Actually, I'll say here, I'm depressed by the fact that the more we harp on ancient India, the less we actually talk about it. The harping is getting you nowhere. Talk about what great things those people did and inspire our students to follow their drive. That's all we should do.
I think just to add to what Sunil was saying, I think one of the challenges has been that you know there is it is very vital that students also engaged beyond their immediate disciplines that they are interested in, to read about people's lives, how things were done. There is a lot out there that can inspire and motivate you to do what you're doing. Stories of so many people who have done things that go beyond, what you and I are trying to accomplish in our research work. Now, it's that sense of where we stand in the scheme of things, what our challenges actually are, what challenges others may have dealt with, could be an important inspiration for you being able to pull yourself up and say, this is doable for me. I know it's been a bad week. I want to come back next week and do this with renewed vigor, right? And I think occasionally you have to be reminded of this. And I tell students sometimes that, it's a privilege to get to be in a place like this, to get the opportunities and, to be able to do something meaningful with it. So, and sometimes you are doing this on a day-to-day basis, and it's very easy to forget that. So that perspective, I think a lot of things beyond your immediate work, I think can bring. And it's important for us to have an open mind to engage with those things. Increasingly, the students come in and think that just being focused on what they are doing is the best way forward. And this I do want to challenge and ask students to be open-minded, and it will add value to what you're going to do. And this is actually a great place where this could add value, where it ensures that you, because a lot of science is self-motivated. I think you really have to pull yourself up and do things. There is not going to be somebody sitting around telling you, it's okay. And so that self drive or self motivation comes from many of these things that you understand and learn around you, not just your immediate, research work. This could be useful.
Yeah, because Jane, this question has been seen a lot, so it would be good if you could answer it as well. How can we inculcate drive in students?
Well, I think, yeah, before I get into those, motivating aspects, there are some immediate implications of what is happening right. And it is a very important distinction that a lot of educators also keep talking about, which is the difference between content and culture. So, I mean, we actually define education as enculturation, but then, most of the time what we're doing is focusing on the discipline-based content delivery and things like that. So right now, what I see, I mean, of course, it has been the case for quite some time. There is no depth of content. Okay, so, and spending enormous amount of our time in delivering content I personally think, is a huge waste of time and space. Best thing would be to focus a lot on how to engage with content, because there's a lot of difference between what is content and how do we engage with content, which is what I would call as a kind of a transdisciplinary skill. It is nothing to do with whether it's physics, maths, biology, physics, or whatever subject you are talking about. So how do you engage with content? Let's assume that content is already there and it's accessible to people. If you start with that assumption and then focus a lot on what we do in a research institute and an academic institute, we can actually set a nice example of introducing very special courses. In fact, our courses time is better spent on how to engage with the content rather than delivering content, because content is already there. Whether it's you want video content, it's there. Whether the text content, it is there. So there is absolutely no depth of content out there. So that is one important aspect that is out there. And then there is a lot of coming to the motivational aspect of why I consider this particular chat interface a very, very different game altogether. People like to speak, and sometimes people don't want to speak in public. But then here is a place where you can actually continue to have that conversation. And one interesting way in which these things are actually designed, they're designed to be addictive. They keep on pulling you by appreciating what you're saying, by by driving you to different directions and telling you what are the various paths that you can take up. Of course, you can always also configure those things if you don't like them. But the point is that this is a very important way in which it gets motivated. Like, for example, for the last 40 days, I started developing a software entirely from scratch using the AI tools. And let me tell you, it is actually pushing me to keep on advancing feature after feature. It's never telling me that, no, you have finished anything. Okay, now shall we, now that you've finished this, very good, let's go and add one more feature to it. Let's go and test the software, whether it's actually, it has any bugs or something like that. Let's write documentation. Let's push it to GitHub. It's actually doing all this stuff, which is really interesting for me. As a person who is engaging a few hours every day trying to write software using this, because I wanted to test its potential. And it's doing a fantastic job because it is actually giving me standard patterns that are used all over the world and giving me right advice, telling me about those things. So in that sense, it actually puts me in a kind of a flow when I'm working. And that I found a very interesting thing from a learning point of view. From a little bit of research part, which is a side part of it, but even in terms of making, okay, so the pedagogical implication of this is that if you tell these tools that this is the project that I'm working on, okay, so that we can shift to project-based learning model rather than content delivery model, is a huge opportunity now. This kind of opportunity wouldn't have been possible earlier because it was largely passive. Now here you have a co-pilot sitting next to you, guiding and hand-holding you, and also doing all the heavy lifting. And that is certainly very, very interesting for me. And therefore, teaching how to do these things to our own students is certainly a very important area that I would be interested in.
Yeah, that's very interesting because generally when we think about AI, we think that, okay, if it is a standard test, then it might disincentivize students from learning. But if we use it correctly, for example, if we make it based around projects, then it is actually making students more, have more agency and become more active. That is a great thing. I have one question from the Google form. So this is by Kunj Tandon. They say in research reporting, we spend a lot of effort publishing the successful data. Would AI provide a way to document and analyze the experiments that failed or did not succeed?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think, see, right now, for example, as I see it, and I have thought about this a bit because, as this technology is growing, you can obviously create or access data that is available to everybody. But could it be possible for institutions like ours to create internal databases or internal AI hubs? Right? Where, for example, a lab has an AI hub, which essentially takes all the experiments. Like my lab has been operational for 10 plus years. What if every experiment in the last 12 years that we've been working on was added to this database, right? And said it worked, it didn't work, right? Such that a new person coming in now searches and it kind of connects all the different times that this experiment was done, conditions under which it worked or it didn't work, and kind of provides a summary on whether they should either do this experiment or they should use based on earlier experience, not attempt it, right? So I think a way to uh, kind of assimilate information, because students who have done a lot of these experiments were actively thinking about them at that point of time, and when they leave, their thought process leaves with them, right? What if there is a way to salvage that thought process, to have it saved for later, right? Such that now when somebody coming in new looks at this information, they are looking at thought processes of many people who have actively done the work over the last many years to guide how they design questions. So failed experiments could be a very integral part of that, is my sense.
I think all the labs have to learn how to create a local instance of Llama on DeepSeek and start training on those things. And if necessary, we'll have to bring in experts who can teach us and things like that. And let me tell you, uh, I have been trained by the machine itself now. How to do it. Like, say, if I ask the GPT saying that, okay, I want to train on this data, uh, can I set a local? Can you help me to set up a local Llama instance or DeepSeek instance? And it is helping me to do that as well. So, all this potential is already there. So we don't have to always use online instances. We can use local instances and populate our data locally. So. And this is a huge advantage. And as I said in my initial remarks, that this is a stochastic dynamical systems framework, which is completely different from the way how earlier models worked, and that's that's also the reason why um, there's a lot of rethinking happening in even in scholarly circles about alternative ways in which we understand ourselves actually in a much bigger way. And particularly in terms of how biology actually does tokenization within the body itself, because the tokenization for me is the word to carry forward. How the internal private biology tokens become public. These are very big problems that we are facing today. And in fact, I asked ChatGPT this question very specifically. how do you distinguish between, when you parse between in the LLMs, how do you distinguish between logical connectives like and, if, then, because, and things like that? And it tells me very clearly, we don't do that at all. Everything is a token for them. That's a major shift in the way how we are doing things. And so is the case with how we can deal with the various data that we have in our own research labs, creating very specialized data structures for focusing our experimental research as well as theoretical research as well. Of course, I still have to do a lot of research on critical thinking part, which I'll take it as a take-home point for me. As Nagaraj said, I mean, I will do a little more work on that and maybe come back on how to use these agents for critical thinking.
Okay, thank you for that, GN. I want to take up the next question by Karthik Kakade. In the age of AI, what roles will teachers play? Given that personalized AI tutors might soon replace traditional tasks like delivering lectures and assigning homework, what unique value does a teacher still provide?
Yeah, I mean, if I can pitch in on that, because I have really very strong opinions on that. I mean, stop teaching. Okay, have a conversation with people.
So sorry, one thing I just wanted to add, the school my son goes to, their teachers are not called teachers. They have never been called teachers. They're called facilitators. Okay, and this is a conscious choice by the school, right? And that's what I think we will be, right? That we may provide avenues and help hold hand when needed, but the conventional definition of teacher may change. Sorry, Jay, didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on.
No, I mean, I'm just saying that, because you see, another thing is that, the acceleration of the pace at which things are happening, because a lot of heavy lifting is already done by the tools now. So the possibilities are now endless. Like if we continue to, for example, even have a semester is too long for this accelerated pace. I mean, you should be graduating every afternoon, seriously. I mean, there must be a grade every afternoon, or there must be a credit every afternoon. I mean, that's the pace at which we have to learn. And a lot of readjustment has to be done in this process. I mean, earlier people used to talk as nano courses. I'm talking about pico courses now, because it's really this whole process of, some small achievement and then making sure that these achievements are recorded somewhere, and creating a kind of a profile is actually a lot of path here. So I can tell you one thing: the schools, colleges, governments, courts are all going to be challenged by this revolution. Anybody who is thinking from top down they're going to be dissolved in the ocean very soon. There's a lot of rethinking actually has to happen. If you don't do that, then administration will break very fast, because the responses, in fact, if you look at the way how different countries are responding, it's only the European Union which is responding to many of these changes in a very thoughtful manner and in timely manner, whereas all other countries are sleeping, waiting for the disaster to happen.
China is not sleeping.
Certainly not. Yeah, certainly
China,
not.
I think, has done in a way better than most Western countries, because I think it's a kind of ingrained in their official policy. And as you know, they have an LLM model, DeepSeek, which apparently was produced much cheaper than any of the other ones. And okay, West is busy accusing them of stealing technology, but West has been stealing technology for centuries. I don't know what's the big problem with stealing technology or knowledge. It's a very common thing. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say that it's not just Europe. I know Europe has done this, but China is really, I suspect Japan also. I'm going there soon and I will be asking people. I think they are probably ahead now. I think those are the technological superpowers of the world for the future.
In the world of knowledge, stealing is a virtue, not a vice.
I agree. And it's only held against China, but it's never held against, for lack of a better word, Caucasian people. I mean, this is just an honest observation of mine.
Okay, so the next question, I have one from the Google form. So AI responses are pretty dependent on the prompt, and responses to a similar prompt can be completely different. So how do you send the right prompt such that you get the desirable output? Can we say something on that?
So that is what I said, that we need to train ourselves of how to ask specific questions. In fact, that's a skill. And this is not something that, so this is maybe what I can say, for example, now is that this is what the teachers are supposed to be doing, helping us to ask the right questions. If the teachers also may not have to be trained also to in this whole process, it's a very important thing. So how to ask right question, and also how do you detect when the AI is actually hallucinating? These are the two important things for me. And also,
sorry, go on. I'll come in later. Please.
Go ahead. I mean,
I was just saying that, there is, in some sense, there is no right question. I mean, we should ask a question detailed enough to get an answer, but the question which Saransh read out said to get the answer we want. That's not, I think you're already limiting yourself to that you want an answer within some framework. You shouldn't do that. That's not how we learn. There is no answer I want. There's only the answer which is interesting to me. That's how I feel, at least. So that is one thing. And the second thing I want to just quickly say, I read a joke on social media recently. Somebody looked at their grandmother's Google searches and found that she was writing, "Dear Google, can you please give me information on ... Thank you very much, signed, yours sincerely, Mary." And they were touched that their grandmother was using so much, politeness and thing to interface with an anonymous, heartless thing like Google. So obviously that means, when we ask a question, our personality goes into the way we ask. Okay. And even if we keep it purely scientific or academic, there will be differences between my question and Nagaraj's question, or Jian's question, or Saransh, anyone's question. And that's good, I would say. I don't think that any of us has the best question, but one should be detailed enough. Again, one problem I have, given my age and the era I grew up in, I feel guilty for talking to ChatGPT because I feel it must be costing somebody money. It's just the way I'm brought up. It's like I would feel guilty for wasting time of any of you people because I feel you might have better things to do. I also feel it has better things to do than answer my... I'm sure that 99% it's answering really stupid questions, but subconsciously I feel reticent. So we have to get our students to be much more bold and aggressive with AI, and actually we should have done that with Google also. For example, fake news. I always check fake news by typing the whole fake news into Google and seeing what it tells me. And 95% of the time it leads me to Snopes or these other sites which expose fake news and which tell me in detail what is fake about it. But you won't get that if you don't type like 5 sentences into Google. But who kills you to do that? You just cut it and paste it. I mean, why not? One should learn the use of quotes where Google is forced to respond to the full phrase inside quotes. Most people don't do any of that. They type 2-3 words, see what comes, and go away. So we need to train.
I had good experience of fake news identification using Grok than other places. In fact, Gemini did very bad, whereas Grok did very well on identifying things of that kind, where the biases, etc., also are identified and exposed.
So given that we only have 20 minutes, well, at least for the recording, I would like to ask a few more questions. I am getting a lot more in the Google Forms and stuff, but okay, this one by Jay Kishan Advani. Currently, AI is more focused on delivering content. It is not focused on culture. Therefore, it can't reproduce human-like interactions, something like gossiping. This is why Socratic bots are coming up. So they want to know the difference between existing models like GPT and Llama models, which are employed in these Socratic bots.
I would say let us do that gossiping in the addas that Sunil was talking about some time ago. don't pass on everything to these machines. It's better to have that physical face-to-face human touch while eating, drinking, and whatever, or playing even, for example, in the sports field or something like that. So these are areas that no technology can take away.
I think the challenge is also to understand that those interactions still matter, right? And I think this is the same thing I said about reading, beyond, or engaging with things that go beyond your area of expertise. I think, we did it as a matter of fact, but I know that it has come back to inform choices, decisions, even drive, motivation, surviving failure. All of this, I think, is driven by the fact that you were informed by things that went beyond, your area of interest. And the same is true for interaction, I feel. I think if you feel that your interaction with a chatbot is sufficient, I think is when there is a problem. And I think that's what we should probably guard against, as much as we are thinking about how chatbots are going to replace what we are, going to think or do.
Okay, so the next parts of the next question are from Ashutosh Shukla and Mihir Tandon. Will AI deteriorate the thinking abilities of students? Have you yourself seen students performing poorly after AI? So, for example, some professors talk about how some students they write very good emails, but when they meet them in real life, they don't seem to understand some very basic things. So, any comments on that?
I think the time has come for the teachers to have face-to-face meetings more often and stop, exchanging. Even for example, I used to think that written exams are bad, but now the time has come back for that. Now you rely only on written exams.
And oral if possible. When it's a small class,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oral and written examination is the way to go when it comes to assessments. And of course, the other important aspect of it, though it was not part of the question that is asked, is that when we have assessments, we have to continue to ask, why do we need that exam? Is it to give the feedback or not? Let me tell you right now, as far as the feedback part is concerned, AI is doing much better job than our own teachers.
So good question. What do we want assessment for? Like I'm teaching a course next semester, fourth year course on gravitation. I've already decided now during this meeting that I'm going to now seriously reorganize it, and probably I'll drop in on GN and Nagaraj and all of you and ask you for advice. But I'll do it my way, however I think works. But I want to know I know what is the goal of my teaching, but now I'm baffled. What is the goal of the evaluation? Like, what do I want to give marks to students for? And I've always thought maybe it's just for their future. Like, if they want to use it to get admission somewhere in future, somebody will want to know their marks. That's the only reason I'm giving them marks. Is that correct? And has that changed now? Do I have to do something different than a written exam, or some other way to evaluate them? Do I have to check if they can ask? One of my questions, can it be in front of me, ask ChatGPT a question and I'll judge you based on how good a question, how deep a question it is? Is that a fair evaluation? Because later in life, if they want to know something about gravitation, I would prefer that they know how to get the information than to spit it out from their memory. But I would also prefer that they understand the information.
So something that I recently found out, because I've been constantly exploring about this issue, one of the possibilities could be to share how you are interacting with the thing. That sort of
Sorry,
helps us to.
you vanished again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Just try again whatever you were saying.
Possibly. Yeah, I was only trying to say that if the chat history is shared to the teacher, that also could become a very nice way of assessment as well, because you know your probing abilities, and so that sort of gives us a very good understanding about the cognitive level and the academic habits that you have. What kind of academic habits do you have can be clearly spelled out. Like, are you asking it to break down, or you're just depending on what the agent is breaking down? Are you questioning it as well?
But of course, they could also steal the questions from someone else, or even ask AI to tell us what questions are asked in this field. Problem is that this is a very endless loop, and the only way you can break it is to be in the presence of the person. If you can actually be with the student and see what they are doing, you can assess them. I feel that all concepts like homework are basically dead.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons why I'm very happy. In the sense that, if we really realize that, personal touch is more important, even earlier it is important, but now the technology is forcing us to do that. And the technology is forcing us to have more conversational style of learning,
challenge, GN, is
that's the
also, sorry to interrupt, the challenge also is the size of classes, right? I think if you have to do this with 300 students, I think is also comes with a, you have to figure out what will work at that scale, right? And will also do many of the things that you pointed out.
Yeah, so that's the reason now I said that, if any class, if you're doing a class for 300 people, that class is useless now, because you're only doing a kind of content-oriented class, because for 300 people, you're not doing any project, right? So stop doing that. Or maybe you give a perspective, maybe you give a history of your discipline, which you can do much better than anybody else. So give a narrative, give a story, give a perspective in the class. Don't deliver any subject. So any class that demands 200, 300 people in the class is not a class that deserves to be done in an institute like ours, because we have already said that IISER is created to integrate research into education, and therefore it's usually of course I'm challenging the system, but then that's my duty, right?
Of course. If I may say, what we might consider is, IISER already has the lecture halls, and it's even I heard yesterday we are building 300-seat lecture halls. So, there needs to be more discussion with the people, the decision-making bodies of IISER. But also, just to add, could we make a model, like some of us meet later and make a model of how, let's say, the 300 student classes, see, for better or worse, we have an intake of 250, 300, whatever it is. Now, what is our model of, let's say, 2 years from now or 1 year from now, how we would like to handle those? So just to give a wild guess, supposing instead of two three lectures each week, including tutorials, right? Supposing we have only one lecture session every 2 weeks for 1 hour for the whole 300 class, and all the other sessions are used where the teacher by rotation meets smaller batches of students and makes them engage and engages with them, something like that. So, or the teacher doesn't, I think GN was arguing, and I sort of support that almost no content really needs to be delivered. Teacher just posts what is the content that needs to be studied by whatever means you like, including by asking AI if you want, and then they will only engage with you in smaller batches. Is that something we can think of? Network for the teacher may not go up. In fact, in a way, the teacher won't have to prepare long for pre-formatted classes and slides and blah, blah. Instead, just the teaching skill is just of interacting live with the student, helping them learn and assessing how they are learning.
Yeah, I think that what probably needs to be defined is the structure of how you want them to approach the learning, right? I think that will have consequence, because you want to look at this before you go to this and then go to this, and it could be planned that this week we'll focus on this aspect, right? And spend your time, self-learning what you find out. See, the challenge as I see it is, one of the things that this is leading to is there is a lot of learning to learn is important, right? And I think students may or may not necessarily be self-motivated to go learn for themselves, right? Now this we'll have to figure how this transcribes, even if you create a structure like this, because unless you come prepared with your work to that one class, right? That class is going to be will have very little meaning. And if you come prepared, you will get a lot from it, right? And I've been doing, in running the lab, I have weekly meetings with students in the lab where, we talk about what was planned experimentally. We talk about, how they're thinking about it, and we meet a week later to kind of discuss what's happened, right? Sometimes 2 weeks. Now, that meeting, I have realized, unless they have done their homework, right, in terms of not just the experimental work, but thinking about what that data has revealed, or thinking about how it connects to existing ideas that we are working with, this meeting is only that effective, right? And I keep telling them this, you will get, you have 1 hour, you can decide how you want to use it. If you want me to correct your PowerPoint presentation in that 1 hour, I can do that, but that's maybe not how you want to use that 1 hour. And the challenge I have seen is very few learn to use that hour well. So there is this element of, as much as we may think we may want to change how this content is given, I think the question that also remains is, are students also ready to learn this way, right? Which is something to consider.
I suspect students will more easily be ready if we can present them a model which captures their imagination. My guess is the limiting factor is faculty, who many of whom will depart from the assumption that the way we learned back in the whatever 60s, 70s, 80s, depending on their age, that was good enough for us, so it's good enough for now. It's actually not. The challenges of now are very different. And I feel now when I'm going to teach gravitation, I'm really feel forced to evaluate the goals of why I'm teaching this course. I know that deep down my main reason is so that I understand the subject better, but there must be some goal, for which I am in IISER doing it with a bunch of students. And what do I want them to do with whatever this course will teach them? Obviously, I want them to be able to solve problems of a certain type, but even those problems they can always give to ChatGPT in the future. But I still feel that, if they solve the problem, they will understand something better. I don't know if I'm right. Like, if I say every problem that is in the textbook of the course, you can enter every one of those into ChatGPT and you will get an answer, which is most likely going to be correct. But does that make you a better scientist, whatever that means? I don't even know. I don't even know what that person is going to be as a scientist. I don't know what science will be like in 10 or 20 years. So I would welcome much more discussion. I think it's great we started this year, but it's actually, it maybe is the only thing that we in IISER should be doing with our spare time is these discussions, or even in our main work time.
So there is one aspect that I finding it useful is patterns of the conversation and how those patterns are actually being used again and again. And also, as Nagaraj mentioned, if you look at, of course, all the all the GPT-based applications are now actually telling you how they're thinking. They actually give you that option on the screen of the steps of doing that. And it is very interesting, if this is what we ask the students to learn, those patterns. How do you analyze a given problem? Like how do you break it down? And when you're listing, for example, how do you decide what to list, and in what sequence, and things like that. These are academic habits. I mean, when we write paper, we write exactly that way. That's because this is what we're trained for. but training the students also in that kind of a model. And also when they're speaking, for example, giving them more opportunities to speak in front of the class is very, very important. And that is also an interesting way of assessment as well. Trying to see how they're actually unpacking their thought
Absolutely.
process.
So this is interesting, Jian. The thing is that the course I teach, which is the advanced cell biology course, has a component where they discuss papers, right? Papers that are connected to the course and are, kind of historically important observations that eventually led to, things that happened in the field, right? And the class is broken up into 4 groups, and they are required to kind of, each group gets a set of papers to discuss, prepare, and come and do this. And part of the challenge I see now, which is not there before, is that there is significant reluctance in engaging with this kind of content, where a group has to get together, discuss it, come up with a presentation that they have to go up on stage and make. And, randomly 2 people from the group will be picked to present. And the challenge also is how others engage with this. If a group is presenting, that group shows up for this presentation, the others don't show up. And this now has happened very prominently over previous years. This is a model that worked previously, but which is why I feel one of the challenges is to do interesting things, and seeing value in that conversation interaction in improving what they understand and learn. Sorry, Saransh, as you have your hand up for a while.
Yes, yes. Thank you for those comments. Actually, still have a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, I would like to apologize to the people whose questions I cannot take up. But of course, you can stay back after we end the recording, and you can then we can continue our interactions after that. But before I stop the recording, I can't resist from asking just 3 more questions if the panelists will stay behind for that. The first one is about the ethics of using AI. We haven't talked about that. So currently, before all of these changes come in, as students, is it ethical for us to use AIs in assignments or in our publication work? So what are your thoughts on that?
Sunil, you want to go first?
Okay, I mean, it's a difficult question. And again, in my opinion, a good fraction of IISER should be engaged right now during the summer vacation to work out answers to such questions by having lots and lots of interactions and thinking. But right away, I think one problem of ethics is that ethics often has to do with what is the accepted culture in a community. It's basically, ethics is not a law, it's a cultural thing. So unless we can tell students how we want them to learn, because that is up to us in some way. I mean, it's not a complete democracy. They have come to an institute to learn, and we are supposedly more experienced and mature and trained, and we can help them to tell them how we want to learn. Then we have to lay down some very basic guidelines, and then ethics is whether they follow those guidelines. I mean, there's not a shortcut around that, and it can't be up to every student to make up their own ethics. That has never been the case, and it can't be the case. But unless we give the clear guidelines, we can't catch one student and say, you're doing something which you're not supposed to do. Student will say, when did you tell me I'm not supposed to do it? And if we didn't tell them, then it's our fault, not the student's fault.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because this is a very important question, of course. What I think most important is use it shamelessly. There's no shame to use any of these tools, but do tell people that, this is the source of my, output, whatever response that you got. Okay, this is a culture that we have in academics. Like, why do we cite in a paper? We cite because we are acknowledging the source of from where you got the knowledge, and that habit should continue even in this place. So as long as you are telling people that, okay, this is the tool that I have used, and this is the response that I got, and that is very important, because as scientists we have to reproduce those results. reproducing the similar responses in a different context or in a different context is also something that we have to train ourselves with. And therefore, use shamelessly, but always tell everybody the source from where you got the responses. In fact, that's one of the things that I told even in the recent time when people are using in my responses, saying that if you got this response from a online source or even from a ChatGPT, do tell that this is a response from ChatGPT which I gathered from. I think that citation culture is something that we can say is an ethical responsibility that we have.
Yeah, this just to add to what Jian and Sunil mentioned, I think this is important to also cultivate. Like I think in schools and colleges, because as he said, use it shamelessly, right, and use it in any way that you see fit. If you have thought about what it has put out, evaluated that thought process, and then agree with it, and feel that it has captured what you're thinking well, right? That's important to say. The challenge becomes, are we rewarding the question that was asked to get this answer, right? Because the thought process is not the individuals, right? And I just corrected a set of SOPs for PhD admissions, where this time every single one I put through, a check, and there were many that were entirely taken from AI sources. I also discovered that there is a way to take something that comes from an AI source and quote unquote humanize it, where it adds mistakes. There is a tool to do it, which means if you really want to, you can take something that AI and modify it and put it in an SOP, and I will not find out, right? So I think the critical thing here is, how do we gauge how a person is thinking if this information that you're putting out and sharing with me is a reflection or is meant to reflect your thought process. This I don't have a clear answer to. Even if you ethically write down and say that this was generated using chat GPT, do I now think that what you have put there is a reflection of your thought process? How do you convince me of that? I think is a bigger question.
A small follow-up to that, sir. So a lot of us, we want to apply to summer internships and we want to apply to PhDs. And from the professor's side, we always want to impress the professor. So from your POV, when you see a lot of these SOPs in PhD applications, they are inundated with AI and a lot of it looks similar. So how are you differentiating between these, and how would you like students to apply to you
Yeah.
so that they stand
So
out?
yeah. So one thing is, you can use ChatGPT or other tools to refine your thought process. Let the writing be yours. This is, I think, a useful way to think about it right now. Right? At least I am looking at it like that. I don't know whether it's right, wrong, but you can always say that conversations with ChatGPT were used to refine my thought process, right? And that's a fair thing to do. As I said, provided it is indeed a refinement of the thought process and not entirely a thought that is obtained from ChatGPT, right? So I think it's a good idea to say this upfront. At least when I see it, um, I would still give it credit that the person has acknowledged this. I wondered about this in grant applications, for example, because sometimes the introduction is so beautifully worded. It's done, it's done what I would have. It's surpassed what I could have done, and I know that the introduction to that grant is essentially a summation of results, right? And this has done a good job. Can I borrow that and edit it with information that I put in and then present it, right? And I don't think, as Sunil also pointed out, there are existing guidelines. Like I don't know if DBT, DST, funding agencies, or even institutions like IISERs have defined guidelines for how to respond to this or how to deal with this. And so this is the challenge. So this time when I evaluated these SOPs, I still graded them and I put in brackets written with AI because I don't know whether to dismiss them completely, right? So I think this probably has to be done at institutional level, at national level, for agencies to come up with guidelines on how we accept what's coming from AI and what is acceptable.
Absolutely. And I think leadership here is really important in the sense the head of every institution, head or whoever are the people heading any institution, and the science establishments of the country like DST, CSIR, DBT, etc. What they do in the next 6 months, I would say, no more than that, will be very determining, because otherwise the problems will pile up faster than we can respond to them. And at some point, they'll be also flailing and not really know what to do. And I think, for example, I certainly played a role in drafting IISER's ethics policy, which is up on its website somewhere in an obscure place. But that policy has no mention of AI whatsoever for obvious reasons. It was drafted like 10 years ago. And there needs to be now, a significant portion, maybe as much as 25% of it should be added again, which will deal with AI issues. After proper consultation, we should have a day-long symposium just to design the ethics policy of IISER, have it in the lecture hall with the director onwards, everybody, especially all deans and directors and heads of departments, mandatorily present and participating. This is the only way.
So I just wanted to point out Suren is leaving, but Suren is a former scientist from Agarwal Research Institute. Suren also heads the All India Cell
Oh, yeah.
Biology Association, and people like him should be involved in something like this, right? And I'm
Absolutely.
glad he attended today's session.
I'm so happy and I'm learning so much at this stage. I've become a student again. So thanks to all three of you. Very nice, very nice, excellent, very nice.
Thank you for coming. It's really an honor.
Oh, it's a
Uh,
pleasure.
let's involve you also and more.
Always,
Sure, sure.
always happy
Anytime.
to meet you, Suren. Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just one last question before we stop the recording. This one is from me. So whoever I talk to in IISER about this, everyone seems to say that, okay, AI is like one of the most important things that is going on and we should really do something about it. But with all due respect, it seems like a lot is not actually happening at the institute level. So are things happening that we as students do not see? So I guess the question is why is that? Why are we not changing things? And what are the kind of things that you would like to see get changed at IISER?
So I'll take this first. I think there is a lot to change. I think that the challenge is the rate at which things are happening. Okay, and I think when GN pointed this out at the beginning, about administrative challenges that we are going to deal with, one of the things that occurred to me in the context of that is, something as simple as formulating ethical guidelines on how to do this, right? It doesn't exist, right? Students have started sending out applications with SOPs that are done with ChatGPT, and I don't know how to evaluate that, whether to consider it favorably or not, right? Now, it's a personal opinion almost now with which we are going. So one of the challenges, I think, and I was one of the reasons to say yes to participating in this discussion also was that I'm glad these discussions are being initiated. I mean, I have learned a lot, just as Suren pointed out, just by participating in something like this. More of us need to engage with the challenges or the questions that this is raising. And if we have to suggest two simple things, Sunil is more than equipped. The ethical guidelines that we put in place for research and other practices for initiated and headed by him at that time, we should be able to do something similar, at least at the institutional level, for how AI is used. And so I think the rate at which things are moving is probably what is challenging us to kind of catch up with this. But I think we need more discussions like this. We probably need to sit down as an institution and say going to this is going to move at a rate where if we don't do this now, we are going to be struggling with this. So, and that awareness, some of us clearly do have, I think, has to be communicated to leadership to be able to say, let's sit down and think hard about this. Okay, so
just a very small follow-up to that, sir. Of course, at the institutional level, I understand that things would happen at a slow pace. But how about individual class sessions? Because we feel like a professor has a lot of agency over what they want to teach in a course, and that is surely something that they can start working on maybe right away.
no, so that's what I'm saying. The thing is that when it comes to how AI is used, when it comes to learning, the last time I taught a course, I a section where we were asking a question in the course about what integrants could do, and one of the classes actually put out tools that could be used to ask this question. So I took to class what ChatGPT has to say, what DeepSeek had to say, how its thought process was structured, to allow students to say, you can ask questions like this, right? So I think the self-learning bit doesn't need my permission or anybody's permission, right? You can challenge teachers to think harder by doing your own learning using tools such as this, right? Now, when it comes to, I think the interesting bit is when it comes to evaluation, when it comes to how courses are judged, grades are given. I think is where how much of ChatGPT is relevant, and how is it used. Right now, for the exams that you're taking, I don't think you could learn using ChatGPT. I don't think you're sitting there using ChatGPT to write the exam, right? So when you make a presentation, it is again your skill set. I don't think you may have understood things conceptually using ChatGPT, but that's not going to come and do the talking for you. That's not going to take questions. So that's the bit that I think we have to incorporate in courses. And if anything, I was really debating the value of presentations. I think after this conversation and the thinking that I've been doing, I think it's probably needed now more than ever, right? That in some ways. So I think that's the way to think about it. I think the self-learning bit, taking what was discussed in class, putting out questions, getting answers for yourself, evaluating them, maybe coming back to me and saying, this is what it told me. Do you think this would make sense, right? In the context of what we were discussing. I think that's a fantastic thing if you are able to do this, and that doesn't need any approvals from me. It only needs agency from your part, which you, I think, all already have.
That's great, but I want to add one thing, which is that can we not use this occasion where we have met together to nucleate at least a short note to the director, deans, and heads of department?
We should.
That following this discussion, I think Saransh might be able to help us draft the note. And I don't know whether we should maybe we should send the note on behalf of all who are present today.
So the last note I wrote to the director, I did not get a response on it.
No,
so maybe
that's true of the
could
last.
help me with that.
That's true of all the notes I've ever written to the director.
That's not the reason to not write a note.
First of all, secondly, I think it's also important to place on record that we perceive a sort of somewhat quasi-emergency situation that needs attention soon, very soon. And for example, one concrete suggestion I'll make, this is an online session of about 50 people. We could do better with a session, a half-day session in LHC on a Saturday in Raman Auditorium, where we hope hundreds of people will come, where we really invite. I mean, you cannot drag everybody, but at least faculty who have some integrity to care about this issue will come. And, at least we should escalate the discussion level. I think we should concretely ask the director two things. One, hold a large-scale consultation meeting where people are asked to prepare their thoughts and come on the stage and speak them there for 10 minutes. And they could be vetted, like people could submit some little 10-minute speech, and it could be vetted to at least be serious. And let students participate. They are the ones who are who this is going to affect more than anyone else, and faculty also. And let's share our what you call I don't know what's the word, thought brainstorming session. And at the same time, let the director constitute an advisory committee on AI for IISER. I think that's from all over India or the world, whoever they want.
Yeah, both are good points.
So these two are very concrete recommendations. Let's write them down.